Nobody gives an F about what that building looks like. And neither do the students.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters. Fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. Today's episode is about the moment a student decides how they feel about your institution before they've ever read a single word. Because by the time your value proposition shows up, the decision's probably already in motion. Today, I'm joined by Rafi, a strategist who helps institutions turn ambition into measurable engagement. His work is grounded in immersive research, real stakeholder dialogue, and the discipline of aligning what institutions say with what actually moves people to act. He's led work across marketing, communications, and advancement for colleges, universities, and mission-driven brands, and he brings a sharp point of view on why most institutional messaging doesn't land. Rafi, welcome to the Pulse.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Oh, hey, and I mean, you are like moments away from a big vacation. So we are so lucky you're taking time out of your planning to come and chat with us. But like, where are you going and how excited are you?
Well, I'm very excited. You know, I chose the non-faculty route in my career, so I don't get a sabbatical. But we are planning a family trip to France for 6 weeks.
That's amazing. 6 weeks.
Yes, we got a 2 and a 4-year-old, so it should be interesting.
Where are you starting?
Yeah, so we're starting in the south of France, in the Nice region. We're going to spend some time in Aix-en-Provence and make our way up to Paris. And, you know, we're going to do the whole Disney Paris thing. So
that's fun.
Can't wait. So excited.
Oh my gosh. What a dream trip. And with the young ones too. Now, will there be any champagne houses in your travels?
Yes. And we've already promised our 4-year-old 1 chocolate croissant per day. So we got to deliver on that.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope you have a wonderful time. I know we've talked about this in the past, but like I just had a wonderful trip to Paris last summer, and you know, just it kind of rewired my brain in what you know, like in Europe, and thinking about like how wonderful it is. And I'm like, I got to get back. So love this for you. But let's get into our topic today. Higher ed websites. A lot of times we are asking our audience for too much patience because a student lands on the site, they scan it, and they decide if it's worth their time. And that decision happens really quickly. The brain is processing images in milliseconds. Within, you know, a second or two, attention locks in on maybe an element and everything else just becomes background. This is the problem. Institutions are spending months writing messaging that assumes someone's going to actually slow down and read it. Meanwhile, the student has already formed a feeling based on what they saw, not on maybe what you've said. And that feeling sticks. Gen Z brings skepticism into this process. They question institutional language. They look for signals that feel real, the people, the moments, the proof that this place lives up to what it claims. And when those signals aren't there, they move on. No announcement, no second chance. So the schools that hold attention are doing something differently, and that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. So Rafi, let's start with the reality of how fast this is happening, because you've studied this, you've lived this, you've consulted with institutions around this. You know, that window is so tiny. When you land on a higher ed homepage, how long does it take you to know if it's working or not?
Yeah, I'm so amazed by the speed in which the human brain can process such complex information. For me, it's almost immediate. Obviously, this is where I spend most of my days, you know, leading a digital strategy firm. But I think putting myself in the shoes of a prospective student or their families, just realizing that there isn't much time to really make that first impression. So getting that right is just so important. research from MIT that states something like 13 milliseconds a gut reaction is formed on a site. And part of why I think this is so fascinating, Mallory, is because we're talking about one of the largest investments that we're going to make in our lifetime. Save maybe real estate. So for such a large investment to be made in such a decision around it in such a short period of time, I think this is really interesting in getting it right. One of the things that I notice on sites is that they lead with still images of buildings. And this to me it's always so cringe when I see this, because we operate with this belief that people respond to people. So, this notion of students trying to see themselves is really important. But it's really easy for sites to all kind of give a very same vibe. I completely agree with you that students and families are choosing based off of a vibe, a feeling. It's not necessarily around stats or accolades. So getting that homepage right is super critical when it comes to conveying value proposition in less than 5 seconds.
Yeah. So wait, even if you have a pretty chemistry building, that's not what I should have in the hero of my homepage? Come on.
Well, I think, capturing the beauty of campus has an importance and there's a place to that, but that's not what moves the needle forward for folks that are thinking about where to invest the next 4 years or how many years of their lives. Also, we have this theory that students especially have exceptionally dialed in BS meters. So they can sense it when it's very staged videography or that kind of, the very standard ambient loop that shows the exact same kind of slices of every campus. So what we are interested in is how do we differentiate one school from the other? And there's no precise formula to this, but the ones that are doing it are, we think, are at a significant advantage when it comes to meeting their strategic enrollment objectives and growing as an institution.
Yeah, I'm still laughing about the building thing because this is like one of my pet peeves. And actually, when I consult with ed tech and agencies, it is so typical that you would post on, say, LinkedIn when you have a new client or a renewing client. And my biggest pet peeve, Rafi, is when those posts just feature the building. It's like, welcome to our new client, insert school name here. And then it's the building of the school. I'm like, nobody gives an F about what that building looks like. And neither do the students, right? So yeah, I'm still laughing about that. But your point on differentiation, I've been talking a lot about branding this year with my clients, with CMOs on campuses. A lot of it keeps coming back to language and the fact that, words... we all use the same ones. And when we keep using the same ones, they stop meaning things. A couple weeks ago, I posted on LinkedIn a whole, please stop using these 10 words. They just don't mean anything anymore. So let's pull that thread for a second, because I'm curious in those 13 milliseconds, right? When you are hitting that homepage or landing page, I have to imagine you're seeing a lot of the same phrases, same words. Are there lines that kind of make you question things quickly or that you would advise your clients, just don't do this? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, some of the ones that come to mind immediately, and I'm sure you've probably seen these in your travels as well, but be the change and, where tradition meets innovation. And this one I've seen on numerous Catholic campaigns and as a tagline, but transforming lives through education. These are safe, right? They're very, it's hard to kind of, to poke a hole in them just because they're so benign almost, right? They don't really say much. I always see that as a huge missed opportunity, similar to how when we look at a website and if you kind of put your thumb up in the upper left corner over the website, could it be any other school in the entire country? That's one of the barometers that we use. Also, I would say that language is so important. However, what is conveyed visually, we think is even more important. And getting this marriage right between visuals and content that's where the magic happens. That's where something very special unlocks. We know that the human brain processes visuals versus text something like 60,000 times faster. You can convey so much more nuance and complexity in visuals form versus words. But if you can arrive at some language that is unique, that is bold, that is distinctive, you're going to be cutting above the mix and thus ahead of the game.
So, but who's insisting on keeping the language, like transforming lives in a global education community? Like it's, word salad. Like, why is that still surviving in 2026 when we know better?
It's a great question, Mallory. I think part of it comes down to not really understanding the institutional dynamics themselves. And this is so important. We start every engagement with a very thorough strategic discovery process that's oriented around getting to know the nuances, the contours of what sets one school apart. Now, if a school doesn't know this with some degree of granularity, then it's going to become difficult to articulate it via visual or written word. So I think first and foremost is understanding yourself. Secondly, understanding the peer landscape as well. One of the reasons why we think it's so important to do a thorough peer evaluation is to understand what can we say, what can we demonstrate that is uniquely distinctive to this institution that none of the other institutions within the peer set that are crossing applications with can also say. We think that's really important, and that's one step towards getting that differentiation piece in those first 5 seconds spot on.
All right. So you talked about the thumb over the logo test that you run. Tell me about a real homepage, and you don't need to, call the institution out unless you want to, but I don't know. But tell me about a real homepage that you've seen recently that just like missed it completely, right? Completely failed the thumb test.
Yeah. Well, great kind of case study comes to mind immediately. We recently worked with an institution in Massachusetts, the state of Massachusetts. Doesn't really narrow it down because there's probably more schools there than right. Any other state in the country. But
minus California,
right?
Yes.
Exactly. And the challenge that they were facing was something very common, where there wasn't a value proposition, there wasn't any sort of feeling of what set this school apart. Also, the navigation was wonky. It was being treated like a bulletin board where there was no delineation between tactical information and strategic value proposition information. We think that if you can get the value proposition right, then the tactical information follows. I think a lot of schools operate with this fear that if they don't have commencement or announcement of new leadership on the homepage, then it's somehow going to get buried. We disagree with that. So with this particular institution, we identified a number of issues, including lack of value proposition, poor navigation, and the search itself was just impossible. So these are three common things that a lot of schools are dealing with. And what we did was we conducted our discovery process. We identified some key themes that really set this school apart. And then we redesigned the homepage, some other key areas. We introduced an AI-powered search. And this is something that we're super proud of. Within 1 year, we saw upwards of a 30% increase in deposits from year over year. And now we would never take full credit for that. Obviously, there's a lot of different various variables involved, but it does speak to sharpening the value proposition, getting it right, making it easier for folks to take key actions, to visit, to apply, request information. So we think a lot of this has to do with the student voice and making sure that the student voice is prominently featured. I don't know if you've read Bart Kaler's book on Mission Fit, but we think that if you capture the authentic student voice, again, you'll be at a position of advantage when it comes to finding the right students that are going to be a good fit for your institution. It sounds so simple, but it's not as simple as it sounds, yet it's also not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be as well.
Well, walk me through the first few seconds of landing on a homepage that is getting it right from the student voice perspective. Like, what do I see? What do I feel? And how do I know, if I'm the CMO, how do I know that my homepage is set up correctly?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's about getting clear on what is the strategic objective, the purpose, who are the audiences. What we find 9 times out of 10, most schools are trying to establish a web presence that's much more external facing from a recruitment standpoint. So, unlike the Harvards, Browns, Yales, where they're more about, reputation management and things of that nature, a lot of schools are trying to drive enrollment. So making sure that there are multiple pathways for the most commonly sought information is a big piece of that. Also, I would say framing up the student voice in a way that reinforces strategic messages, that doesn't sound like it's written from the viewpoint of the marketing department. I think there's something really special about having it come from the student voice, that in a way that isn't like being fed lines, but it's from the heart, from the gut, speaking to these points of differentiation, whether it be sense of place, affordability, how they were able to finance their education, or some of the unique attributes, programs, offerings that make that particular institution unique for whatever reason.
So where is this breaking? Like, is it leadership hesitation? Is it committee thinking? Something else?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is that it's easier to say something generic about yourself. It takes a lot more boldness and sense of really understanding your institutional identity to double down on something bold. We recently worked with Susquehanna University, their tagline, be impossible to ignore. And we love that because it's so simple, but it also speaks to the ethos and the foundation of the Susquehanna education. Some of the other more generic ones, like the ones that we shared before, be the change, it doesn't mean anything. Virtually any school could say that, but there's something that feels very in keeping with the personality of Susquehanna in that particular example. So I think it's failing when people don't do the work up front, where marketing teams, institutional leadership, they're not doing that deep dive, that investigation to really articulate with great clarity why.
Yeah. We need to talk about AI for a minute, because I think there's an emerging school of thought that the institution's website has really decreased in importance because a prospect can just go to Claude or ChatGPT and ask it all the questions about your institution. That might be how they're discovering you. That might be how they're getting key information at this point. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that school of thought, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, well, no question about it. AI has already reframed how folks are getting information and researching schools. With that said, the purpose of the website, in our opinion, has not changed. It still remains the center of an institution's digital ecosystem. With that said, there's also ways that you can ensure that the site is being written for AI in a way that you can kind of eliminate any guesswork in terms of what search results are for folks. Also, we think some of the best sites out there, best EDU sites, have AI search built into it. So you're not just getting your traditional search. It makes it a little bit more dynamic. It's more in keeping with how people are engaging with digital properties in general. So I think AI we see it more as a supporting catalyst for the success of sites versus kind of an emerging competitor.
That's a great way of framing it. Tell me more about AI-powered search. You're talking right about like the search bar right within the .edu website. Are you seeing more institutions implementing search that's powered by AI?
Absolutely. And in the last 2 years, I think virtually every single one of our conversations with executive leadership has had some undertones of this, because most schools, they want to be positioned as being future forward. So it's kind of a no-brainer in many ways. A lot of schools, they might not be ready for it, or they see it as being too much of a burden. But what we found is that there are some really excellent tools out there in the marketplace that harnessed correctly, can make a huge positive impact in the overall user experience, getting people to the information they need. It eliminates the need for complex navigation. And like I said, it's more in keeping with how folks are just interacting with the web these days.
Yeah. I said this maybe 3 years ago, but like I'm just waiting for the .edu homepage to come out that is just an AI search bar, like, and nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a matter of time, Mallory. I mean, we're already seeing huge shifts in the search landscape. I think that it's an area that we're going to continue to see disruption in. And it's kind of like the silver bullet answer, right? When people are like, oh, I can't find this, I can't find that. Or when you redesign the navigation on a site and people, we're creatures of habit. So if we don't find something immediately, it's so imperative to get the search piece right. AI provides a great way to do that. Same thing with chat as well. Chat has become so much better and more sophisticated. It used to be, 3 years ago, if it was a chat, it was like noticeably bad, right? You could kind of tell that it was a robot. So
get me to a human. Get me to a human.
Exactly.
Over and over.
Whereas now, I don't know about you, but there have been moments where, I'm like several minutes into a conversation, I'm like, wait a second. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but certainly speaks to how quickly it's evolved.
I had that experience with Verizon recently. I was calling in, and for the first 5 minutes, I was like, I literally don't know if I'm talking to a human or a robot. And for the record, it was a human. But like,
it was a human. That's funny.
Kind of sounded, yeah. Anyway, Rafi, let's close with something that people can act on quickly. If a CMO or a director of web is listening to this episode right now and goes to their homepage and pulls it up, what's the one thing that they should look at and, instantly know if they have a problem or if they're on the right track?
Yeah. So we have this process we call the RDS method, and it's basically a really simple way to do a quick gut check on the success of any site. It revolves around looking at 4 different areas. Number 1, first impression. We talked about that 13 milliseconds and how important those first few seconds are. Does it give you a feeling of what it's actually like there, or is it a bulletin board with pictures of buildings? 2 is ease of navigation. What's the navigational experience? Are people bumping around, getting dead-ended and outdated information? 3, this one's really important, is quality of visual assets. Just doing a quick gut check. Do the visual assets accurately, authentically convey the essence of the institution? And then finally, brand emulation. Does our institution's brand come through, our brand dynamics, our differentiation? If we do the thumb test within the upper left-hand corner, is it obviously, unmistakably XYZ institution? So that's not one, but I think if you look at it as one kind of exercise, you'll walk away with a good snapshot of where you need to focus. And it's a lens that anyone is invited to use.
Wow. Well, that's terrific. That's a great framework, and I'm sure will be very useful for folks. So thank you, Rafi, so much for joining me today. Any parting thoughts before we close this out?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, Mallory. And I think every school should ask themselves this. And what I would say is the most important thing is just authentic student voice. If you can get that right, you're going to be ahead of the curve. That's what students want to see themselves. So I think that's that's the most important thread to focus on. Amazing.
Well, gosh, I hope you have the best time in France. Enjoy every second of it. Drink all the wine for me. And, when you are back 6 weeks from now and we are all catching up with you at one of those fall conferences, I cannot wait for the stories that I'm sure you are going to have, Rafi. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Truly a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you very soon, Mallory. Thank you.
All right, folks, we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.